Great. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right. Vice Chair Oler excused. Okay. Next up, any additions, deletions, or corrections to tonight's agenda? Yes, Commissioner Whalen.
I want to note, and it's a bit of a technicality, but it's a big deal at council level. Tonight's meeting is a special meeting. This isn't our normal second Wednesday of the month, so our agenda saying regular might throw future readers off. So,
Chair,
Yes.
at a special meeting, doesn't that mean there's some actions we can't take, like approval of the
Not
minutes?
as long as it was on the, we're not taking any action really tonight anyway, but as long as it's on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay. So do we want to modify the title of the meeting with that stated, or?
well, I would just make a note of it, and I don't know if there's a point where the
Okay.
clerk could weigh in on it and just say whether, from, the city clerk perspective, whether it's a correction needed, but.
Okay, so we'll make sure to check with the clerk and reflect it in the minutes. Okay. With that, we'll take it to citizen participation. We have nobody in the audience today. So with that, we'll take it to approval of minutes from January 31st, 2024. Any comments or discussions on minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of January 31st, 2024.
Anybody second? All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes from January 31st, 2024. It's been seconded. All those approved?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimous. Okay, and then regular agenda, Planning Commission training. With that, I will turn it over to staff.
So, I tried to include for everybody a bunch of the bylaws, and then some planning commission reference materials that is provided by Jurassic Parliament, as well as sample script for 5 main motions. So I just want to run through, I sort of kind of summarized the information that was presented, as well as hopefully getting everybody back on the same page of what our role is, what your role is, what my role is within everything. And so, and again, I think just about everything came out of the information that I've provided you. Is just try to summarize it. So my thinking was to go through, highlight the things that I think maybe are most pertinent, and then it's not very long. And then the chair can kind of see what discussion, if there's anything people wish to discuss more. If there's, at the end, there's sort of some recommendations from what I learned from these packets that I think might help us going in the future. But obviously it's the Planning Commission who sets their guidelines and their consensus of how they want things to go. So I'm just gonna, like I said, it's just sort of highlighting what's in the packet that you got, because it was a lot of reading. Hopefully everyone had an opportunity to look at it. So just a reminder of the role of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is to carry out the council's instructions. And so, and it's gonna always, and then it's authorized by both the RCW and the Milton Municipal Code, and it's always gonna deal with land use. So it's the land use chapter, it's the environmental chapter, and it's like the subdivision chapter. Those are the ones that if it falls through that, both with the state code and then in the MMC, those are those areas. And then it also, if you look in the code, it talks about these are what's considered type 6. The idea being that the Planning Commission does research, holds the public hearing, and makes a recommendation. Again, depending on how the City Council has sent it to the Planning Commission, is how much of that review they're doing. But if nothing else, they're definitely doing a public hearing. And then it's the City Council that makes that final decision. In the end, they're the ones that have been elected, and they're the ones that ends up being their decision. So as much as I know it's hard when we have ownership, you guys spend a lot of times on stuff, it may get up there and they may, they can adopt it as is, but they can adopt it with modifications. They may choose to change it. On a rare occasion, they may send it back and say, we have more information or we have a new direction. They may send it back to the Planning Commission, or they may decide, you know what, we appreciate all your work, but we're not passing it. And on a rare occasion, that happens. The bylaws, so I did include the bylaws. They're really pretty basic and they just sort of kind of expand what's already in the code. It does identify that Robert's Rules of Orders are to be govern the meetings, so they're supposed to kind of help us get through them. The bylaws can be amended by the majority, but they can't, basically you have to introduce a change at one meeting and you can't approve it till the next meeting. So if there was stuff that the commission felt that they wanted to look at, or if one commissioner makes a recommendation to change, you have to wait to that next meeting. So again, they're pretty basic, but, they may be due for an update. That might be something maybe for next year's work plan. There were some questions about attendance, how that works. So it does say in the bylaws, I believe, that a member may be recommended. So removal of a member may be recommended if such member has missed more than 3 consecutive regular meetings without satisfaction. But it's simply a recommendation to the mayor and city council. I did not find anything that said it was like an automatic or anything. So it's based on if they feel like someone is sort of abandoned their post or isn't able to do it. I also went through and I know it's customary to excuse a member who has notified the commission. Otherwise, it's just an absence. But I did not find anything specific language in either the bylaws or the code. It might be in the city council rules, but I didn't find it in ours. So again, I think it's something that's sort of customary, but I didn't even find it in Robert's rules. I looked up absences and all kinds of stuff. So it more just dealt with if there wasn't enough for a quorum. So those were some of the questions that have been brought up. So I just want to highlight those. And then I want to, again, go through just highlighting the best practices that I took out of Jurassic Parliament, which I've said in here and I'll say at the end. They have a great website. She offers both in-person live training. She also offers just, you can pay for a class. There is money in the budget for Planning Commission. So if you go there and there's a couple that you think might be worth running through, let me know and we will pay for that. So just some quick, again, the hope is that by using both the guidelines that she does, and this is a gal who I should have had her bio. She's been doing this for years. I believe she's come to the city before and helped. I know I've done training with her. This is her expertise, is how to make meetings, especially government meetings, councils, commissions, boards, work smoothly so that we can be as efficient and hopefully be as pleasant as possible and hopefully serve our community. So just some general reminders. We have to have a quorum, which for us is 4 members for business to be done. Robert's rules of order are there to aid in the meeting, but they're not used to be weaponized or controlled. And so we all need to be familiar with them and understand why they're there. But on occasion, we may choose to suspend those for some reason if it makes sense. The chair is the facilitator, helping the commission to hold free, fair discussions, make good decisions. I think April's is doing a great job, especially now that she's had a few more meetings under her belt, feeling more confident. Obviously, we all need to come prepared. Preferably, you really need to, read the packet, know the procedures, which is why we're doing this, is we've realized that maybe we've missed some of that and we want to kind of freshen. Part of being on the commission is compromise, collaboration, concession. It's part of the deal. Each of us, and we'll hit this a couple times, each of you represents a different neighborhood, a different group of people, whether that's age, family, politics, philosophy. And so the idea is to have 7 people so that you're hopefully getting a cross-section of your community. And so you're not all going to think alike. And so you have to figure out ways to make that work. Seldom will you all agree on an item or recommendation. And it's normal procedure that when you're on a group like this, it's expected that you stand behind the majority decision. So, decorum. So again, if you serve on these boards, we have to make sure that we want to make them productive. And the best way to keep them productive is to have some common parliamentary law. It's based on the idea that we're all going to be courteous to one another. We're going to stay on topic, keep remarks to the item at issue. You can speak to the issue, but not to personalities. And again, reminding us that we don't all think the same way, and that's the point of a group. And you have all been chosen because you represent different perspectives, backgrounds, or beliefs of the residents. So then she also identified, again, giving credit to Jurassic Parliament through all this, of what are inappropriate comments look like. It could be things which I don't think we have a lot of. We don't have this necessarily here, but you can get it sometimes in bigger groups. Anything that's directed at personalities or looks or beliefs, if you're attacking that. Or audible sounds of disagreement or saying things under your breath, those kind of things can all be kind of personal attacks. Remarks that incite high emotion. So we can't, sarcastic comments about other people groups. Jabs at political parties of views. Any comment that you're just trying to get a rise out of somebody doesn't help the meeting move forward, doesn't help us do what we're trying to accomplish. Criticize past actions unless they're specifically tied to the action item. So if we're like, hey, we want to discuss, changing from 2 hours to 3 hours or 2 hours to an hour and a half, and you want to discuss why in the past you think that's been wrong, that makes sense. But if it's going, have frustrations from previous staffs or commissions or agencies or long histories or long backgrounds, it doesn't help us move forward, and we have to be with what we can handle. And then the last one is tangents on items that the commission cannot change, things like state or federal law. We have these, it is what it is, and we can't change that. So we need to focus on what we can change, which is, and what we can address, which is what's before us. And then issues that are controlled by maybe other departments or other agencies, whether that's the police, Public Works, Pierce County. That's not what your role is, and it's it's not my role. So again, trying to keep it onto the topics that we are dealing with.
May I interrupt and ask about?
Yep.
Okay, so with like tangents on items with items the commission cannot change, there are a lot of, for example, state mandates that are coming down that maybe we are opposed to, but we're forced to kind of comply with. Can you do something like abstain from the conversation because you're not in agreement? State that, while I'm frustrated with this, I'll include myself in this conversation. I just want to make sure that we respect, because I know when we've seen political campaigns later, they say, well, you didn't speak up, or I don't feel like you're representing me. So I just wanted to make sure someone has the option of kind of voicing maybe that they're not in agreement with the conversation, but they will proceed for the better of the commission or the community.
I guess I would say it's one thing to say, I'm frustrated that there's a bunch of these that we have to do, their state mandates, and then you go into the topic.
Okay.
It's another if we get off track and we go on and on and on. And it's a self-governing thing. It's up to the Planning Commission. If you feel someone has gone off something that is not helping us move forward in the topic that's here, that's where either the chair can say off topic, or one of the other members can say point of order and say, I feel that that's off topic and not helping us. And then there's a process that's in the handouts that talks about how we do that.
Okay.
And again, you're here for a limited time. And so we need to, and we do have a lot of stuff. And so it's trying to figure out how do we help us move forward, not frustrate each other, and be as productive as we can, be respectful of your time, my time, and everything. So again, it's not trying to limit the fact that you like or don't like something. It's where are you putting that energy and how much of time are you spending on the topic that we're trying to get through.
Okay, thank you.
These aren't, this would have not passed the people who are colorblind tests, so I apologize. These are actually just some outside stuff that help us when we're dealing with people, is to remind us, set aside distractions, listen to what people are saying. Too often we're ready to say what we want to say and we're not really listening to what people say. And suspend our judgment and reactions. Again, that kind of falls back into really trying to hear what they're saying, why they're saying it, what are they feeling. Ask yourself, again, those questions or other questions. Why am I reacting this way to what they said? What do I think? Be mindful and respectful of everyone's time. Welcome discomfort. We're not all going to agree. It's okay. That's why we're here. And then value the different takes on issues. All right, a little more. That's all the sort of putting us all in the right frame of mind. Here's actual, so when we're dealing with an actual action item, like we are going to vote on something tonight, this is sort of, again, the run through. You would ordinarily, a member makes a motion before any discussion begins. And if there wasn't a second, it dies. If they go in a second, nobody. Assuming that there is a second, it's open there for discussion, which the second slide talks about how we're going to do how you do discussion by Robert's rules. But let's say someone makes a motion, and sometimes this happens actually to us quite a bit. Someone wants to amend the main motion. We're like, oh no, we need to change, we want to amend that. Again, you make a motion. It is discussed and voted on before you go back to the main motion. And then after the discussion, the chair calls for the vote. The motion passes with the majority of those voting in favor, unless something else, but I think everything here, we don't have any at this level, nothing, we're all recommendations, so we don't have any like super majorities or anything. So that's sort of the way the motions work on items that are actions. So the discussion for action items. A reminder, we all have equal rights, privileges, obligations. This means that discussion is not a conversation. And I know, and I'm bad at this too. I have a tendency to get into that. So we're going to discuss action items, which I think we actually do pretty well at the Planning Commission level. It's when we have more of the study sessions and the other things where there's less structure that I think we've had a harder time. So support rules. The chair recognizes speakers in turn. And if we're following Robert's rules, no one speaks a second time until everyone who wishes has spoken once. And they recommend like a 5-minute timeline, kind of that you would go through. We need to not interrupt. And again, courteous, respectful, stay on topic. And if a commissioner breaks the rules, the chair may correct, or again, another commissioner can do point of order. And then either the chair says, yep, point of order, please get back on the topic. And then if that one says, no, I was on topic, it's important, if someone agrees with them, you can actually do a vote of the commission to decide, yep, that is close enough to the topic and he or she is allowed to continue. And then also if you feel like, okay, it's time to vote, we've discussed everything, you think there's enough people that would agree with you, you could say, well, I called the question. And at that point you have to, the chair, all discussion stops and you vote on whether to vote. So you vote on whether to vote at the motion, and you need at least 2/3 to cut off discussion. So if we'd have to do the math when we have it, but those are sort of when we have an action item that we're trying to move through. Yes.
May I ask a brief question? And that is, when someone says call for the question, is there a stipulation or something that's in effect that everybody has spoken at least once on the item? I was looking for that in the materials, and I thought I read it in a more in-depth place, but I thought that was a caveat to the process.
So we can double check the Robert's rules. That would probably make sense. And most of the time people don't call the question unless they feel like it's just been going round and round and round. But yeah, and if it's, we can double, like I said, I have the Roberts rules for dummies, but I,
Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
The question I have to follow up on that is that the time frame of 5 or 10 minutes, because they said, some say 10 minutes, some say it's too long, 5 is more appropriate, is that it's the time limit that would stop the person first if they continued on without having to call point of question, because the rule would be,
call the question is
Later
saying,
on.
call the question is saying, we need to, we're done with discussion, we are voting on the motion right now. There's point of order, if you feel like somebody's
That's
past
wrong.
their time, you could say point of order.
Right.
Now, we don't, as far as I know, the commission does not have a set time. At the end, I sort of have some suggestions that the commission can decide by consensus, if that sounds appropriate, that they might want to put some of that in play. But you could, point of order is just kind of stopping it for a second and restructuring. Asking the question is like, we're done discussing it, we've been at it for 3 hours. Does anyone else agree with me?
Yes,
Wait.
Commissioner Boyle.
get to our question, I prefer to wait for me until you're through, and then we get our time to say what we want to do, instead of asking right now. Because I don't know if
Well,
she's
like I said,
through.
Well, you already asked a question. Can I give Commissioner
give
Boyle an
Tom a
opportunity
question.
first and make sure everyone's had one chance for one question? Just because we've already had 2 questions, it's only fair. Commissioner Boyle?
What you got?
I'll write down my question and ask it later.
Oh, okay.
So the next slide is,
Make sure I'm staying
the next
fair.
slide, I think,
I lose track, that's why.
kind of deals with what is the thing, some of the challenge I think with the planning commission is we do a lot of more study session presentations where we're on 2 or 3 meetings where we're discussing it. So it's not there's not a motion, there's not a small discussion, there's not a vote, there's lots of discussion. And so how do we make that, I think, more productive? And so these are recommendations, suggestions to think about. And again, my last slide is going to then open it up for the planning commission to kind of think about the things and decide which ones they think is important. But this is the recommendation, is that we, during a presentation, like kind of limit it to like clarifying questions, like I can't read that slide, or did you say, Townsend or Tinsid or whatever, and then try to just save all your discussion items and broader questions for the end. The second is in the paperwork that you got, she recommends what's called exploratory round robin. And I think a version of that might be really appropriate for what we're trying to do when we have these big topics. What it would look like is basically on the first, or after the presentation, or after, I present or someone else presents, basically we just go around and everyone says, these are the items, real quick, these are the items that I want to discuss further, and these are the questions I have. So maybe if we're doing the sign code, it's like, I want to discuss, portable signs more, especially, what the distance is from the front of the property, just sort of like hit the highlights so that everyone has a chance to kind of see what the commonality is and if there's common questions. And then again, trying to remember if we've discussed it in a previous meeting, and then it probably doesn't necessarily need to be made again, depending on what that is, unless it was unresolved. Then have staff answer any of the questions first, real quick, as best we can. And then take each item that has been raised individually. Because again, part of what I'm hearing is things like, because some of us, we have our list, and so we're sort of going through our list, but then it makes other people think of things. So maybe if we break it down like, okay, we're going to start with portable signs, go around, everyone has a chance to speak. And then we take the next topic so that we're not getting off. And then again, trying to use, I think, especially when you're dealing with large chunks of code, when we're doing those, is using that consensus majority. Discuss enough, but be like, okay, we've discussed this. There's kind of 2 options. you know, what is the consensus on this? Are we going left or right? Are we going up or down on this? And then we move on from there. So that's sort of, and again, I got one more. I think I got minutes that I just want to kind of remind everyone what those are. And then we'll come back to what I've been hearing people talk about. And I think then you guys get to talk and kind of come up with how you want to move forward with your things. But just a reminder that we do what's called action minutes, recording what is done and what is said, not what is said. So they are going to be brief. Again, based on her recommendation, which, again, she's the expert in the field, plus I've AWC and MRC sort of back up on a lot of the stuff, is that you just include the main motion. You don't have to do all the little sub ones. So you may say something like, you know, after discussion and an amendment or amendments, the following motion was approved. So you don't have to track every little thing. You just have to kind of maybe acknowledge it. You don't have to be, so if you weren't at the previous meeting, but as long as you've read the minutes, you are allowed to vote and approve on it. If you are going to object to the approval of the minutes, you need to have a correction. But I'm perfectly happy for people to send typos ahead of time. So again, I will, if there's something that is an error, I will happy to correct it. But for the most part, wording, again, because they're action minutes, it really is just tracking what happened and occurred. I know we summarize what people, like what commissioners say, but those aren't actions. So I'm happy to include them, but they don't have as much weight, I guess, is where I'm at there. So then, yeah, so this is sort of where I'm gonna kind of pop up my things that I think I got out of this, that I think, and I've heard commissioners talk about that I think might be helpful. And then I can happy to turn the lights back on and turn it over to you guys to kind of how best you want to discuss. But do we want to use some sort of round robin for study sessions and presentations? I think there's consensus that we really all need to read our stuff ahead of time. If you do have materials for consideration, and that's, again, if it's like, hey, I found this great article, I found this great website, send it, if you can send it to me 24 hours in advance, I can get it right out to everybody else 24 hours in advance. If you have questions for me that you want, you know that you're going to ask and you want to help me be prepared, I'm happy to do that. I should say day of, not day off. I'm not, don't send that to me on my day off. If you could send it in the, and again, 10 a.m. is just a number I picked, but you know, like today, all afternoon, I was in, I had a half an hour meeting that turned into an hour and a half meeting. I had someone else at the counter, so I may not have time if it comes too late. Do we want, one of the things that, again, if you read through the packet, was to actually put like little rough times, estimated times on the agenda. Is that something that we want to look at? Like, you know, this, if we have 3 topics, this topic gets half an hour, this topic gets 45 minutes, this topic gets whatever's left. With that, also with someone, and again, everything has to be flexible, but when we are bringing, because we've got some big things coming up, should we, so, you know, if we're bringing, these are the code amendments for the procedures, do we want to say, okay, you know, I would come to you and say, I anticipate this to take 2 study sessions, a public hearing, so 4 meetings total, so that everyone has in their head, this is roughly what we're trying to do so that we can accommodate. Now, if we get there and there's a consensus with commission that, oh my gosh, we found something we didn't expect and we think it's gonna, we really want another meeting, obviously that's at the discretion of the commission. But I think it would be helpful if people know, okay, we're gonna talk about it just in study for these 2. This is when we're thinking the hearing, so people can kind of plan accordingly. Happy to do that if that would be helpful. Again, I don't know if you want to set a timeline. Again, there's preferably self-monitored, like we have a nice, beautiful clock now for, again, that you go around. Not that you can't come back around after everyone's taken, but trying to, again, these are things I've heard people say. It was also in the note. She recommends 5 minutes. And then again, the idea of using consensus to close out an item and move on to the next one if there's a couple different sides, or even if there's just a change, like staff presented 100 feet on something and the vast majority are like, nope, we want it 200 or we want it 50. Give me consensus so that I know, yes, the planning commission as a whole wants this change. It's not just one person or two people. That helps me know for sure what I'm doing, and it helps you guys know that it was addressed. And okay, the last one will be that, yes, anyway, we have a budget. So at that point, I will leave this here. I will give it back to the chair. However, you guys, again, I don't know if there's discussion on bylaws, discussions on this, how we're feeling, but hopefully this helps us go the right direction.
Yeah, so I think it would be good to start with the list on here and just check these off and then go through any questions anyone has or comments or recommendations for future. Oh,
Too much?
yeah, if you can just leave them off so I can read the board. Okay. So the first item on the list is using round robin for study sessions and presentations. So let's just open up item 1 for discussion and then we can keep going down. So we'll start with Commissioner Johnson.
I think the round robin approach is excellent. And because I'm speaking for Commissioner Olner, who said sometimes, and it's true, that I've taken time, some of us have taken time, that another person feels they haven't had time to jump in on their turn because we move on and we're running out of time or something. So I think a round robin approach with an initial time limit. So it's the idea of 5 minutes around on a round robin, and then the chair, and we're only directing to the chair on everything, says, does the commissioners request a second round of more clarity on which subjects?
Okay.
But I think a 5-minute time beginning is essential. And what would be a maximum time that any of us in the 2 hours that we're here, would a person, any commissioner take up?
Okay. Any other comments about the round robin approach? Yes, Commissioner Whalen.
So I think we sort of follow that method when staff presents items and there's a discussion. I'd love to see a clarity around when we're in round robin. Is it conversational where people are just adding to the conversation? I personally would favor a process where the chair recognizes the person. And I really like the idea of when you're recognized, you ask 2 questions. Then the next person is recognized. They ask 2 questions and work it in that fashion so that people don't feel that they don't have an opportunity to speak. And the other thing to clarify is the 5 minutes. Does that include the response time from staff? I mean, that's a lot of timekeeping we're going to be using, but I just would like to have a clarification on that. And the last thing on round robin and in things in general is I would really appreciate us working towards having a clarity about when it's appropriate to ask questions. For example, I followed your example as the chair, asked a question, and then a valid point was brought up, hey, let's save questions for later. So I'd encourage a habit for all of us to check in, how do we want to do this? So that, and I think we heard it from Manager Stallnecker, if you want a clarification of a word or a number, but it's not a broader type of question. So I like that idea as well, to help keep the flow going. So those are my chief points on round robin. Thank you.
Other comments on round robin?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, Commissioner Boyle.
I don't know if this has to do with round robin or not. Thank you. I have, this is very informative. This is almost more informative to me than this whole packet, was this slideshow. This woke me up to some of the things that I do when I come to the meetings. You get emotional and you want to get your point across, you want to get your questions answered, but I don't see, besides during COVID, as far as the production of the Planning Commission, where we have not gotten our agenda completed by the 2-hour time period. And I don't know why a 5-minute limit would be even necessary, but I guess if we were getting to where we were long-winded on our meetings and we were running out of time, then absolutely, but I haven't seen that happening. What I see happening is a presenter asks a question. Are there any questions? The chair says, looks around, are there any questions? I raise my hand. I proceed to ask my questions, and I'm interrupted while, maybe I'm out of line. But just to be blatantly interrupted or people huffing and puffing when somebody wants to make a comment, I mean, if it's the commission's desire for me to step down because they don't want to hear my questions, or, like I've learned here, maybe I'm throwing in too many personal comments, but I'm trying to get across of where I'm coming from. And a lot of that is personal. So do I want to be pushed around by the government? Absolutely not. And so that comes across as crass. It comes across as he doesn't want to get along and this and that. But I don't see where I've gone over any 5-minute limit or where I've been deserved of being interrupted when I have the floor. And I've tried to be very respectful of other commissioners when they're speaking, not to interrupt. So, I mean, that's why I thought this refresher course would be helpful. And I would absolutely love to have a copy of this presentation, because there's a lot of points in here that I will work on personally as a commissioner, and I appreciate them, because a lot of those are not in this packet. And I can see that they're directed at this commission, and it's gonna help our productivity. But back to the point is, I don't feel that a 5-minute limit is necessary. I mean, 5-minute limit for somebody speaking, we don't see that very often from a commissioner. It's 2-3 minutes, and then we go into a discussion. Now, if it's a 5-minute limit on that question, then maybe it's something we need to look at. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's what I get from the round robin. Is round robin more like, my question to the commissioners would be, is a round robin more like a study session back and forth where there's no decorum? We just talk and interrupt each other and everybody kind of goes at it. Or should we stick to Robert's Rules of Order? You have a question, you raise your hand, you're chosen, you speak, and there's discussion or there's not discussion on it. You move on. The next person raises their hand. Absolutely, everyone should have a chance to speak, but I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding what I read in all this, but I don't know if this round robin thing if maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but.
Yeah. If I may.
Was
yes,
that more
let's go
than
move
5
it.
minutes?
No, you're good. I was just saying that let's go ahead and let staff clarify that round robin, and then I think I have some tweaks or edits as well, but I want to make sure the group has a chance
So the vision of the
first.
round robin would be, so let's, like I said, we kind of I would do the presentation, and then we sort of have identified whatever topics we want to discuss. So maybe, like I said, maybe it's portable science. That's what I'm picking on tonight. So we would simply go, the chair would start with Al and say, you're first. Do you have any comments on, and he, the idea of 5 minutes was he would have, which actually could be a lot actually, but that he would have up to 5 minutes this round to talk. And then after if he could say, nope, pass, or here's my few comments. And then it would go Commissioner Whalen, and then April would go, so everyone, she would go in the circle. Everyone has a
Gotcha.
chance. And then at that point, she'd go back to Al and say, okay, do you have any more comments on this topic? And so you're just sort of, because I think what happens sometimes, and then I'll be done, is certain people raise their hand and then other people aren't doing that as well. And so it'll go back and forth between 2 or 3 people, and 1 or 2 aren't feeling like they're being seen or acknowledged, where you would just go in a circle. And then maybe the next one you'd go this way or something, but.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way I kind of envision a round robin is, or what they were explaining was kind of like, oh, that's what I was trying to say before when I first started, was just that we have a chance to go, okay, I've got a list of, I've been taking notes during the presentation. I go start with Susan and go, okay, and she goes, okay, I have these 3, 4 questions. She's not asking for a response right then. It's, I have 5 minutes just to kind of go through and say, these are the questions I have or the clarifications I'm going to need. And then it would go all the way around, and then staff would have a chance, or the presenter or myself, to say, here's the response, you know, okay, I heard that these are the questions. Here are the responses from staff. So now that we've got responses from staff, let's do another round of this. And so that there's a little bit more of, because yeah, what I'm seeing is, does anybody have any questions? No one really has questions. And then someone raises, and then someone goes, oh, now I do. Or, you know, and then it does start feeling like everyone's feeling interrupted. I'm trying to keep track of whose hand went up first and trying to keep it fair, or someone starts counterpointing, and it becomes a little bit of a, and I'm guilty of it too. Like I want to jump and answer because I'm like, oh, well, that was actually last time. And so I think calling more to, if it is getting off topic, or instead of huffing and puffing, if it gets off topic, you can say, point of order, this is off topic, can we get back? Or I think there was something about, was it point of information? Yeah, point of information, where someone can restate their question or something to try to get it back on topic. So that was kind of how we were envisioning round robin. I would say, if I may, with presentations, it does feel like there's some natural pause points where maybe we may want to look at, if you're getting to a point where you're lost, it doesn't make any sense to continue the presentation. So it may be good to say, Chair, I'd like to go for a round robin of questions, and do, you know, because there are times that I think it is valid to go, whoa, I'm totally lost here. Can we go for a round of questions? May I do one round of questions and then let them answer and get back to topic, or back to the presentation? I don't know. Checking with the group, how do people feel about that idea? Yes, Commissioner Elmstead.
I love that idea. I am not one to speak out myself, so giving each member the opportunity to speak, whether they would raise their hand or not, but not take over, I think it's less about a limitation of time more so than the opportunity for everyone to have a chance. And I think that could keep things in order when questions are necessary or had in general with all communication with us.
Okay. And any other questions,
I
comments?
do, but I gotta wait because we
You
have
already
one that
spoke.
hasn't talked.
Let's put you on the spot. Come on, Commissioner Sweat. Any comments so far?
Actually, I like the round robin where everybody takes a turn to speak. And if somebody says something that clicks something in your mind, write it down.
Mhm.
So, because you'll get a chance to talk again. But I rather like that round robin idea.
Okay,
Pretty good.
great. Commissioner Johnson?
Everybody spoke?
Yes.
Everybody did.
I would say for this, I think we're okay with a little bit. I
think-
know it's like we're discussing what we want
Right.
our rules to be, but I think we should.
What it is one thing the round robin can do is keep sides down. It gets you more succinct in your presentation, and you're actually looking at what the document is and saying, and it's not always a question. It could be, I want to look more into this. I want to look into item 4 on page 66, and it's without opinions. It's clearly stating, it lets the presenters know, the staff know, that this is an area at the beginning of the meeting. You know, when we first hit that topic, it's clearly, I have questions in my 5 minutes on page 43 with this item I have, and it's not necessarily a question. But the idea you presented with presenters is when we have a part we're not really understanding, that's so appropriate for a round robin at that time as well. That gives everybody a second to let them know we don't understand that without a lot of discussion and just going on and on. I've done it. I did it on council. And it's a learning thing to say, to be succinct. What is the issue? Declare it and move on. In the 5 minutes, fine.
Yeah.
For the first one.
I just wanted to suggest that when it comes to presentations and perhaps an added feature for us is to, if we're feeling lost, or ask permission of the chair, just,
Yeah.
and then make it a situation where maybe there's a round robin midstream or maybe there isn't. But the general theme would be the assumption that we all understand it. We save our substantive or broader questions till the end, and it's only until there's something that needs a little, did you say two or whatever, that there's a clarification, so.
Okay.
Because I think it's a benefit to the presenter as well to not interrupt their train of thought.
Yeah.
And I think it's valuable as well in steering the group that, you remind us, or whoever the chair may be, or running the meeting, is a reminder of, okay, so what we're going to do is, you do that sometimes and it really does help.
Okay.
So it helps me at least understand what the protocol, the expectations are
Okay.
for that segment. And it lowers any kind of stress, or, because like you say, there's that moment where a question is brought up as a result of someone else's conversation. So I'm just glad we're having more discussion.
Right, Commissioner Boyle.
Thank you. Just to note that this is going to be a lot more work for the chair, I believe, for keeping track of where the questions are going, who hasn't spoke, are there any more questions? Those kind of things before we move on. Because usually it was a hand raising, just a simple, like the guy says, does anybody have any questions? I sat over there, looked around, nobody raised their hand, so I raised my hand. And then when I started to speak, everybody wanted in on the conversation. So, I mean, it's, it's keeping track of who's spoken and who's not spoken has now become kind of part of it.
Yeah, I think if I may just respond directly, I think this approach may help as far as, so presentations midway, and you really just get to a point where, like, I'm lost. Can we have a mid-agenda discussion, right? So you can say point of order, or, may I interrupt, ask the group for a consensus as far as I propose a round robin. And then I would just start with maybe whoever proposed it, make, a clock. And then I'm not looking for hands. I'm just going down the row as far as the relevant round red robin. I keep wanting to call it a red robin.
The wheel, we'll
a
call
round
it the
robin?
wheel.
Yeah, or, a reel or something. But just, may I propose a mini round robin? That person goes, because it's like, if they're just lost, I do want to make sure we have a process to say, I'm lost. Otherwise, it's the discussion's ended. And then you get to, do we have questions? We just start out one side, work our way around. And then I'm not trying to keep track of hands and who raised their hands first. So it actually would help me a little bit, if that's okay with you.
Me,
Yeah,
personally?
you personally.
I just don't want it to turn
Yeah.
into a PTA meeting. That's just
Yeah.
what I don't want. We need to keep order in the meeting and, not have people talking over each other and trying to put in comments and this and that. Let somebody speak, and then when they're done, you can speak. It's decorum. I mean, it's just the way it should be. I mean,
Yeah.
it's right here in the packet.
Commissioner Olmsted.
With the round robin, I would like to maybe throw in there, if it is going in a certain order, if a particular, myself, doesn't have a question or doesn't have a comment, that I could pass and then come back around after everybody else. I get forfeit my turn, think on it still, continue to think on it, but not lose my opportunity to speak
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, I would say that would be part of the protocol as far as you can say pass. It's going to go around, staff's going to answer questions, and then we'll ask if there's another round of questions.
And then we'll continue that process until everyone feels like their questions have been addressed or the conversation's been had, or someone calls for, what is it, to end the discussion?
Call for question?
Call for question, or unless there's a call for question.
Yeah, I'm just thinking order-wise, if it's
Yeah.
like Susan and then me, and I'm like, I don't know yet, like,
Yeah,
pass, and then I
yeah.
lose my chance when I'm trying to figure out my words.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner.
So call for question is supposed to end the discussion, and then a motion's made, and then you can continue to discuss?
So call to question is, I'm ready to vote. Are you guys ready to vote?
Like a poker call.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
And so it's a vote on whether or not we're voting. It's not a vote on if you're going to vote yes or no. It's just it's a vote, 2/3 passes as far as I'm ready to vote. I would say, if it's okay that I keep throwing out suggestions out here, that there would be no call to questions until after the first round of Robin. As far as just so that everyone's at least had one chance to speak, I think that is fair to not go, okay, well, it's April's turn. I hate whatever she's going to say every time. So I'm just going to call the order now, or call the question now. If that's a fair rule. Yes, Commissioner Whalen.
I appreciate the candor and hearing different perspectives and being reminded that some people are not especially comfortable with hands up all the time, that to be asked. And I remember my early days chairing, that's how you got people talking, and it's evolved, and now it's a good reminder that for some people it's just, I want to see.
Okay, so oh,
Sorry.
yes.
Could I suggest that everyone read page 31? It says the advantage of the exploratory round robin, and that's what the first round robin should really be, is the exploratory one. And that's why it really does allow everyone to speak on the main motion and before any movement goes forward. And it's really that area there on that page on 31 is very clear of the purpose of it. And the main thing is if you watch Congress and you look at the state, is that there's not a lot of side talk. There's, not side talk, but there's not a lot of putting color to our words.
All right,
Succinct.
so I feel like we have discussed round robin for study sessions. From what I'm gathering of the group, it sounds like it's a fair protocol. It sounds like when we get to a presentation or something like that, all as a reminder, say, please hold questions to the end. We'll have an exploratory round robin after the presentation, just so that. And then if anyone asks a question, I'm not going to say, no, you can't ask a question, because we need to know if it's just a simple clarification or if it's like a round robin or something. But if it feels like it's getting off topic, well, we're going to have to practice this a few times. So we'll fumble through it a few times, but we'll get there. Yes, Commissioner
Can I
Whalen.
ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
And that is on call for the question, that is when someone has made a motion and debate has gone on the motion. It's not, gee, we're finished with the round robin, or, let's vote.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get
Call the
that clarity.
questions
so-
for voting matters, correct?
Oh, that's when the motion has been made and seconded.
And then we're
Yeah.
discussing the motion.
Yeah, so that's kind of what there's kind of like when there's a motion and it's something we're taking action on, which I think for the most part, by then we've done all of this. So it's pretty straightforward. And that was the only time you would use
Yeah.
call.
It's,
Yeah.
if I may, it's like the debate is going back and forth, and it doesn't seem that one side's giving.
Right.
And the other.
And then you're like, someone's like, you know what, I just want to vote.
Gotcha.
And is there consensus to vote? And, but if we're just doing study sessions or presentations, there is no motion. So we're just doing round robin as many times as we need until either we run out of time or,
So with that, if, so there's going to be point or times where the round robin just feels like it's getting off topic. What do we want our protocol to be as far as a point of order? I feel like we're off topic.
So the-
Can we close
yeah.
the discussion?
So
That
when
would
we,
be point of
when do
order.
we
Point of
cut,
order.
when do we cut Tom
Like,
off?
yeah.
I'm gonna go to the restroom on this conversation. Let you guys figure it out.
No, that's what I was waiting for.
Remember the lady, she did the little dinosaur things.
She was good. Had that dinosaur.
Is everyone okay with just a point of order and it's my call? And if I don't feel comfortable making the call, it sounds like I would say, let's put it to the group.
Yes.
Can I
yeah,
get a
that's
consensus?
fine.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner
Say
Wynn.
that there's, and I appreciate these materials so very, very much. It's really helpful. There is a process where if the chair has made a ruling and someone disagrees with it, they can appeal it. It's got to be seconded, and then the group is deciding. So there's a two-step phase in there so that
Yeah,
things can be fair to everyone.
great.
Just so for my clarification, the point
Yes.
of order is when things are prior to a motion, during discussion, if things have just derailed.
At any
Let-
point you feel things have derailed or off topic, you can interrupt and say point of order.
Okay.
If
And
you're
then the
going to
call
interrupt,
Question
yeah.
is after a motion has been made and seconded, discussion is happening and it's still just
if you feel like discussion has, that,
exhausted itself.
yeah, that discussion's not going to change anymore.
Question. So it's like a poker call, like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
this is enough,
Yep.
we've ended up,
Mhm.
just call.
Yes.
Okay,
I call you.
perfect.
Yeah. All right. Going on, read materials early. I don't know if we need to discuss that, but
That
That's
was just, I changed the
Okay.
title, so sorry about that.
just want to make sure if anyone's
Binder.
opposed to that idea.
A roll call. Did you read your materials?
If you have material, oh, yes.
Pardon me, but it seems to me with the new City Hall hours, it does have a bearing on when our packets are ready and available for us to pick up. So it's sometimes, like this time, it was challenging because we lost the whole weekend, and that happens just because it was
Is there anyone,
unusual.
I don't know that anyone else picks up a packet.
I do, and I got mine today,
Okay.
and they ran it off for me today.
Because I took your
would like
typical
to.
puppy.
They were all gone. They were all gone when I came today.
I don't know if they were.
They were printed because I picked one up today.
Oh.
I would like to print them up and write my notes. I usually just download it from the
Yeah.
email because there usually isn't any available.
Yeah, so let me think.
I like to have a copy of it
Yeah.
at the meeting, but I
To
do
take
like it
notes.
to receive it on the email,
Yeah.
because I don't want to print it at home,
Exactly.
like all 80 pages.
Yeah, I think so there's a couple options. Yes, so every other Friday we're not here, and every other Friday when we are here, we're locked. We have options. One, if it is the Friday it sounds like during COVID, we put stuff in the box, and we've done that still. Or you can come on, our meetings aren't usually till Wednesday, so some of you may be fine picking it up on Monday. If you do want it before, it doesn't hurt to have it done on Thursday. It just means that I actually I'm not rushing as much. But like I said, we can have it available. We will try to have it available on Thursday. We can also put them in the box if we know people. If I know so many people are wanting to pick up, we can put it, we still have our little milk crate.
Yes.
I can tell you that every meeting I will pick it up in the milk crate if it's there, if I know it's there. Otherwise, I go to City Hall, and a lot of times I have to rush to get here by 4:30, whenever they close. But I would mention that one of our planners would deliver the packets to our house individually, and I swear to you that happened.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, we used to, and yes, when I started in Fircrest,
But I'm just teasing you.
actually, our police department used to deliver. So you get chief to okay it, and I will have them deliver.
No, I personally, it's way more convenient for me to, as long as somebody throws me an email and says, it's available in the box today, I can go pick it up. And so
There's a box?
Where's the box?
the milk
It's just a
box.
the
milk
milk- it's
crate
the
in
white-
front of.
Where?
You,
milk
right outside
box.
our office.
Well,
You
slap
walk
my
past
ass.
it.
Oh, that box.
That box.
Well, I'm thinking.
We don't actually have milk delivered to us here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it's been a
What
while. I haven't
box?
picked up from, because, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that box. Yes, yep, yep.
So is there consensus, I mean, not consensus. Does everybody want one?
Yeah, the sooner the better for me personally. I only have 2 days off fall.
Okay, yeah, if
Um,
we,
Everything.
we are
I'm okay
happy to
with,
print.
yeah, I'm okay with email. I usually print myself because I'm not going to stop by here ahead of time, but I'll let you know if there's times that I want a copy.
And I will continue to send by email,
Yeah.
or Tricia will continue to send by email. But we're happy to print, and if you want to do meeting by meeting, that's fine too.
Okay.
Okay, that's good for me.
This week was just because somehow I timed this wrong, and I had like everything on the city council agenda as well as the shortened between that meeting and this meeting. And I just had too many deadlines.
You're good. It happens.
I won't do that again to myself. That was a bad planning. So-
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Whalen.
I'd like to make a standing request that there always be a packet printed, and the another great advantage of having them available outside in a dry place is that if you're home, on your way home from work at 7 at night, you can go pick it up. So it's really a great advantage.
Yeah.
The other thing is I'll speak for myself and just say, to look at the screen for hours reading, it's very hard on me. So I'm an advocate for the paper printout. So thank you for making that option available as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I like to have the paper and then be able to have that for notes while I look up other things and not have multiple windows.
I don't need the email because I go right on the agenda
Get
and
over it.
download it from the agenda.
You're going to keep getting the email because it's more work not to send you the email.
I get
than
too
to
many
send you the
freaking
email.
emails.
Get up, Susan. It's just a mass planning commission. It goes
Oh, no, not
All
another one.
right. So we've agreed that staff will continue to print materials ahead of time, and instead of leaving them up front, they're going to start leaving them in the milk crate so that people can pick them up at any time. Sounds like you're going to assume probably 4 or 5 copies, and then if I'm the odd duck and want to do
I'll have at least 7 copies out because
Okay.
whatever nobody picks up, we'll just have
up front.
here. So
Okay.
we'll just make sure there's enough for everybody. If you pick up, great. If you don't, that's fine.
Cool. All right. If you have materials for consideration, provide 24 hours in advance. Any discussion there?
Just yes, please.
Okay. Comments? No? Okay. Ask questions of staff in advance. Request by 10 a.m. on every other Friday or weekends.
All my days off.
Yeah. No, so if you have any questions for staff in advance, as far as if there's anything that's going to help you understand the agenda better, or
That's just
yeah,
letting you
clarification.
guys know, ideally, if I can get it in the morning, that gives me time to plan if I need to grab something or prepare for something.
Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
The question is, I have on that, if the materials for consideration are given to the staff 24 hours before, then other council members haven't had the opportunity to see the new information.
So the number 4 would be, hey, I've got more questions on the background of this. I'm going to ask it tonight, but I wanted you to be prepared.
Ahead of time.
So
Good.
yeah,
That's
so
what I like
yeah,
that.
so maybe
Okay.
like, hey,
Right.
Like
Don't
when
throw
the
you-
chickens came up, I think there was like, why is this even happening?
Right.
Why is this
Yeah.
on our agenda? You can probably ask staff ahead of
gives
time.
me a heads up. Hey, I'm going to ask this question tonight. You might need to
Yep.
do a little
good.
research.
Okay, I understand that now.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Whalen.
I want to make sure other people had a chance to go. This is my second time. We have to self-monitor. Okay. On that topic, this would also be a category where if we came and encountered an article at MRSC or something that was germane to the topic as further depth of knowledge, that would be another.
So I would say if you had something, like I said, those are the things I say I would prefer the day before.
Okay.
So that we can send it out the day before, and that gives everyone one more night. Like you said,
Okay.
the earlier you get your packet, the easier, the earlier you find out, like, hey, I saw this article, or there's this, I found this website, it might be useful for everyone to look at. If you want to, if you can at least give it to me the day before, I can send it out to everybody else. that gives them a chance to have the opportunity to. And again, that would be, like I said, materials. If you're just like, hey, I've got my comments, just bring your comments and we'll do that in discussion. But it's that, if you found an article, you found a website, you found something that you think might be worth reading ahead of time.
Okay, yes.
But you're saying that your stated preferences, if we have, such as I did tonight, I sent you a series of, these are questions, background, could you address them? And you would need to get that by 10 a.m.
I
at
would
the
be-
latest.
Yeah, if
day of
it's
the
something
meeting.
like, hey,
Okay.
you might want to look at these ahead of time, for me just to answer, if I could get it in the morning, then I can try to find a time during the day. Because my afternoon, I thought I was going to have open to do stuff, got eaten up by everybody else, so.
Okay. Number 5 is setting time limits on the agenda. How does everyone feel about that? So that would be our agenda says, 6:05 for this, 6:10 to 6:30 for this. We'll go Commissioner Elmstead first.
I personally don't know if that's necessary. I think specific issues would need more or less time determined between what we've already established with the round robins and questions and control of the group, that unless that isn't abided by, then we could set up that. I feel like that could do more harm than good if there are legitimate questions, but the time goes over when it's according to something.
Yeah.
One thing, sorry, Al. One thing council does is when it's getting near 9 o'clock, there has to be a motion to move past. I believe there should be some time, I like timed agendas to a degree, but breaking it down, we need to be at this point at such and such a time unless we have to stay after 8 o'clock. Because we're a two-timing person. Two-time committee.
What happened to you on Valentine's Day?
Okay, we're not getting personal, we're gonna change.
I'm sorry.
Change. I just happened to bring that out, people, I'm sorry,
I
right,
think we
Tom?
need a sample of your water bottle. Really in that.
Well, humor is good for our souls, you all know that. See, and that's an aside and inappropriate when we're doing business. I just gave you an example.
Well done.
Okay, so getting back on topic, so what was your, do you
done.
like a time on agendas? or
I
yes?
like some of it, I agree
Okay.
in a point that some things run longer, but if it says, hey, we really think this will only take 10 minutes, let's try to keep it there, because the big meat one down below is going to take us an hour.
Okay,
That's what I mean. And she would know, our staff member would know what will take the meat of time.
yeah. Commissioner Sweat, what do you think?
I don't think we ought to put time limits on the agenda. And I have to agree with the commissioners over here that say, because some things need a little more time than others, and I agree, and some don't need hardly any. But from what I've seen on this commission is that when you have a topic, it's going to take a year. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
But there's an awful lot that we go through, and to put a time limit on it, I think we're stepping on our own toes.
yeah,
So let's not do that. That would be my recommendation.
Great. Any other comments about time on the agenda? Yes, Commissioner Wayland?
I just concur with Commissioner Sweat that there's not a need, the art of managing a meeting could simply come into play where you may make a comment. I can see we're approaching such and such a time, and, how does the commission, and then if we really do need to have the guardrails, we can always add it later.
Okay, well, it sounds like majority of what I've heard is let's leave it off. However, if we do feel like there's times where we say, hey, heads up, we think this first one's gonna be short, but we want to make sure we give a full hour for whatever's next, we'll just cover that as far as the agenda goes. All right, 5 minutes for individual statements, self-monitored. I feel like this one might get
more discussion. Let's start with Commissioner Sweat. How do you feel about 5 minutes for?
5 minutes. I've rarely gone 5 minutes. I don't think I've come even close, but
Yeah.
I want to say, leave it as an unwritten rule maybe, but I don't think we really need a rule that says 5 minutes and then you're done. Because there may be something, it may be a topic that takes some serious consideration. And there are topics that we've dealt with that are going to take more than 5 minutes. And for a person to express his opinion in 5 minutes on a major issue, I think it's just cutting a little bit short. If it gets a little long, then I say, well, maybe we should move on and finish our discussion, then we'll come back during our round robin or red robin or whatever.
Yeah. French fries. Yeah, Commissioner Whalen, what do you think about the 5 minutes for statements?
I'd suggest that we reserve it from the perspective of how it may not really fit in most situations. However, as I would suggest that I think it's going to be challenging enough for us to keep saying, is this my second time around, my third time around in this round robin process as things bounce around, so.
I would say that I agree as well with the consensus over there that personally, I will work on getting my questions out and trying to disregard some of my jibber jabber and jibes at the state level and things like that to try to keep that out. I mean, everybody here has something to work on. And, this has been, it's, unfortunately, it's the way I've been, it's the way I've always been, but if it's helps with the production of the Planning Commission, then I'm definitely going to work on that to try to keep, you have to give some of your personal views and things so you try to get people to understand where you're coming from. And it can be looked at as one-sided and political, and people look at things subjectively, and so I'll work on that. But I think that'll help keep the meeting moving and keep the 5-minute rule in effect, I think, for as far as I'm concerned. So as far as other commissioners, though, I mean, I think with the round robin, it's gonna tighten things up a bit, so.
Great. Sabbath, Commissioner Olmsted.
I agree over here that I think 5 minutes should stay in place as like a maximum, but with the control of round robin, I don't think if we're organized and keeping to the subject and putting emotions and jibber jabber and all the other BS aside, that any of us would really take more than 5 minutes, especially if there's extra rounds. If we were, that's 40 minutes per every agenda item. If we were to each take 5 minutes, the meetings would never end. So I
Yeah.
think having a limitation or a guideline to just keep on track, but I think round robin is going to really help facilitate that.
Great. Commissioner Johnson.
One thing that round robin does is it does show attention, attentiveness to what this situation is and what the problems are versus my opinions, because I'm supposed to represent others. So it's looking at how to solve something without putting my bias into it. So if we were to we had 2 items on the agenda. First one, there's 6 of us, and that's not counting the chair that would follow up after everybody else goes. That's 30 minutes. If you have a second item that's really bad and hard to deal with, not bad, but difficult to deal with, 6 minutes at 10 minutes, 6 people at 10 minutes, not counting the chair, 60 minutes, that's 90 minutes. And so we have the minutes, we have the people, we're here for 2 hours. The purpose of the round robin is not to prevent discussion. It's to see succinctly in a short period of time what the main concern is first, it's quick. One thing, this is my first concern. That I want us to address. This is my first concern. This is mine. This is mine. Then there's discussion, a little bit of discussion, or it's allowing the presenter to answer the first go-round. It hones it in on the problem and the solution and not my personal issues of my life, what I see, my anger, and it's hard to keep my anger. Mr. Boyle knows that. I have a hard time. And it's worth it to try and to see what the feedback is from people watching Zoom, because they want us to act professional. And I know sometimes I act silly, but being succinct in the presentation gives us that professionalism.
Great. All right. So it sounds like we're in agreement that I think we can all kind of monitor ourselves with the thought of like 5 minutes, but if you were to actually time 5 minutes, I doubt we go that long. I would say that if we do feel like something's getting to be a long-winded discussion, someone could say, before we get into this round robin, I'd like to limit us. And we can always say ground rules if we feel like it's one of those meetings, or staff or chair can recommend that if we feel like it's one of those kind of discussions, if that sounds okay with the group.
Is anybody else going second before I say anything? I disagree a little bit like that, because that takes time to do that. It takes time I'm putting myself out there in the thinking about what the true role of the first 5 minutes is. Gets it moving. It's the
Yeah.
juice. So I can't self-monitor me for 5 minutes, and I don't think any of us can.
I think what we're saying is it's pretty rare that someone's going to go 5 minutes to begin with.
That's not true, and I disagree respectively. I've gone more than 5 minutes. There's been several of us that have gone more than 5 minutes on some things, and we wanted to, but we lose the opportunity to really find a solution because we're throwing in asides when we're talking. So can we try it one meeting? Whether you sit it in front of yourself or something, that it's 5 minutes on the first go round, on the first meeting, on every item on the agenda, just one time. And then you can self-monitor. That's all I'm asking, to see the difference.
So how does the group feel as far as everyone self-monitoring themselves for 5 minutes for next meeting to see if?
Sure.
Sure.
Question. Is it 5 minutes, like Commissioner Johnson, although I'm not supposed to call her out by name? Commissioner Johnson just made 2 comments in 2 round robins. Is it 5 minutes for each round robin thing, or was she 5 minutes for her whole?
For both rounds.
So
I'll
I
defer
think,
to
I think
Too big.
Commissioner Armstead is right in that I think all the other things that we're trying to put in will make the time limit go away. The idea would be that each time you talk, you have a certain amount of time. But I think from what I'm hearing is everyone's kind of focusing in on trying to be more specific about which item we're doing. And I think if we do that, I doubt, most of us will probably only talk for a minute or two. And I will talk less because I also got reminded of what my role is, and I think I got sucked in too. So I don't think in most cases it would be an issue. And I think if someone did started for whatever reason, got on their tangent or forgot what we were doing and got, telling a story, then it's the other members just to kind of gently remind them, hey, we need
Yeah.
to get back on topic. So I don't
Yeah.
think it's going to be an issue either.
Yeah, I don't foresee it as an issue, but I fear that it's something that could get weaponized as far as you start going, time's up, point of order, you're at 5 minutes, and I just don't want it to get to something where it's like I think the times that someone's going to go over 5 minutes, point of order is if you're getting off topic, but if it's a legit 5 minutes because it takes 5 minutes to make that point, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of okay with it, but I'll check with the group and I'll start with Commissioner Elmstead.
I feel like that again comes to self-regulation, that
Yeah.
if it is on topic and serious for 5 minutes, that is something to consider as the group. If it is something where we're scrolling off and going down a rabbit hole, point of order would be appropriate, but not necessarily weaponized. If it is on topic, that is on topic still.
Yeah.
And could be important, but I think that we are all adults
Not
with the
me.
ability, with round robin, writing down our questions. It will allow everyone to consolidate your thoughts, your feelings, your
That's what-
points,
yeah.
your questions. And I don't think that most of the times it would exceed 5 minutes in general with anyone talking all at once.
I'm going to go back and listen to the minutes.
So I
when I'm
thought I
at
heard
time.
two things, that it's 1 point per topic, so, or is it a self-monitoring 5 minutes, and you may have 5 points of concern on an issue?
So that's where I think we're getting a little, like, what is this 5-minute rule? So maybe staff can, so either I can say what my interpretation is, or you can, and then we can go from there.
So again, depending on, in each situation might be a little unique. So again, I think the suggestion was made, and it might have been Commissioner Whalen who said, kind of like before each thing, like, okay, these are the guidelines, because there might be a little difference between, like you said, frameworks coming or somebody's coming doing a presentation might be a little different than when I'm doing something on code. So maybe just a little beforehand, we're going to use this version, or, this is how we're going to do it. But I think if we go with kind of the recommendation of the round robin, the first round would be you're listing sort of just highlighting, these are the 5, 6, 7 things that I have issues with, or I would like to discuss more. So everyone just sort of goes through, and we can either eventually get, if we want someone to do a whole board thing, eventually we're going to get TVs, and then I can just type them in and they could be on the nice little TV screens.
Good.
But just everyone sort of goes through however long it takes you to just say the items, not defend your items, not argue your items, but just these are the things that I have questions, comments, concerns on.
That's right.
And then you may find out that everyone's got a couple of the same or whatever.
Yep.
Then maybe we go through and say, okay, let's take the first topic.
Right.
And then if we're only doing one topic, it will probably, some people may not have a comment at all. Some people may just have 1 or 2 on that.
Yeah.
That's what I understood, kind of roughly what we were doing.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I understand the round robin, is that someone presented information, you are taking notes, and you say, or start at this side of the room and I say, Alan, what are your questions, comments, or concerns? And you say, I liked this, I didn't like that, I wasn't sure what this meant. And we're preparing for staff or board or presenter to answer those questions. It goes to you, you would say, these are basically the notes I took. I do want to make sure that we're clear that the point of the round robin is to say, these are the points I took, these are the questions I have, not I'm going to respond to his thing, and then I also have my own things, and oh, by the way, I know what you're going to say, so, before you say anything, I want to say this, and, I do want to make sure that the first round is exploratory of, these are the questions I have based on the material presented, without commenting on what other people commented on, if that's a fair point to make. Okay. I kind of want to make sure we button this up at 7:30 because I know we have another point or another agenda item. So I'll go through
So 7
Item
was just the
7.
idea of, I think, I try to get council to do this, and I encourage planning commission, use consensus.
Yeah.
It's yes, don't cut people off, but once you get to the point where you're like, we sort of have, like, we think we've made a decision to change something, or that's a great tool. It's not a motion, it's not the final, but just say, yeah, is there consensus to make this change, or is there consensus to choose option, sometimes I'm giving you an option A and option B or whatever. That's a great tool to kind of, if there's a majority that wants to move one way or the other, to not get us stuck on a topic. And it also helps me know, yes, planning commission wants, as a whole, wants to go in this direction. So that's all that was, is just a reminder that that's a great way to help some of the stuff that we're disagreeing on.
One other thing I noticed in here that I was wondering with the group is with the chair position, there was the option of them not voting on stuff
I think
versus voting on stuff.
it said usually that's larger groups, so.
Is that, okay?
Yeah, I think in a group this small,
We're okay.
I don't think
Okay.
anyone has concerns.
Yes, Commissioner Johnson?
One final question could I ask? It's not up there, because we are also talking about the policy and procedures, and I'd like clarification from the staff. Are we, as commissioners, allowed to meet any presenter without you present to go and get information or share information that you're not aware of? Is that proper? Because I know there's some issues sometimes in other areas.
So there's one of these where is there hard, fast rules? Probably not. I would say if there's anything that's based on consultants, because we're paying consultants, it really should go through staff. And again, it's a hard thing to think about is when you are, in the end, if you're part of this body, you should, and I had to learn this as staff, you have an opportunity to say your opinion, you do your discussions, but once a decision, like for me, once a decision's made by the leadership team, I need to support that decision. And so that's one of the recommendations when I was reading through it that she talks about is that, if you're part of a group and you're part of the body and you work through all that, you're not going to agree with everything, but even if you vote against it, you should then stand by it because that's part of being part of the commission. So that's that part. And then, like I said, the other part is if it's, it's one thing if the fire department's here and you want to go chit chat with them, that's fine. If it's one of our consultants, it needs to come through staff because, again, they will charge us.
I've been tempted, but I haven't. So that's why I'm asking.
Okay, yes, last round of questions. Commissioner Whalen?
Relative to the question that you brought up about the chair and voting, our bylaws state that you do not lose any rights when you step into the role of chair and vice chair.
Oh, thank you.
So it's actually a much more difficult job than just facilitating a meeting because you've got two major things.
Well, that's where part of me was like, oh, it might be almost easier if I'm not voting. Just because then I'm like, oh yeah, so yeah, it's one of those I didn't want to necessarily waive my rights or future chair's rights, but yes.
My final comment is just thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to thank Commissioner Boyle so much for bringing this up in his comments last meeting as a refresher, and I just really appreciate the opportunity and the candor, so thank you.
Great. Commissioner Boyle, any last comments?
No, I
Presentation.
appreciate staff bringing this forward, and it's taken up quite a bit of our meeting, but I think it's absolutely necessary to have this. Like I said, we used to have these every couple of years, and it's good. It's good to have a refresher like this. I've learned a lot about my behavior at the meetings, and I look forward to being more productive and helping the meetings move on.
Commissioner Olmstead?
No, good job.
I'm good. I loved all
Okay.
the information
Yeah.
and
Great.
I'm learning. And
Thank you, staff.
Commissioner Johnson?
I said thank you, staff.
Great. And Commissioner Sweat, any last comments, questions?
I'm good.
Cool.
Thank you.
And how about from staff?
No, again, it was a good refresher for me, and I've taken the classes and you need a reminder. And I will share that I did send the slides to Commissioner Olner and we did have sort of a brief little conversation. So and I believe she was going to try to watch tonight. So she'll be on the same page with everyone else. And we had, like it was an email discussion, but a nice little discussion of, her acknowledging this. What I've heard here is that, we all want to work towards
Yeah.
making these meetings efficient and enjoyable for everyone. So that's it on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, staff, for putting this together. It's very appreciated. I know even my role as chair, it's like, I know I'm a year in and I'm still fumbling through it. So, yes, Commissioner Olmstead?
one quick request, could we get a copy of that slideshow?
Yes.
I took extensive notes, but I feel like I missed.
Yes, I
a
will
lot of
send
it.
them out.
Great.
To everybody.
Yes, I will. Yeah, if I send to one, I send to all.
Thank
Good.
you.
I don't need a paper copy.
All
It may
right.
end up on the fridge, it may end up on the fridge for me to look at every day.
Perfect. All right, so next up on the agenda is 6B, comp plan and future land use map.
All right, so, and I don't know, we'll see how we go. So this kind of incorporates a few different items. So it's sort of, I don't know, a follow-up of last week's and some of the issues and questions that came out of it. And I closed my stuff down. Let me bring it back real quick. So just, the first part is just, again, sort of thinking through, and again, what our role is when it comes to the comp plan, when we've got a consultant on board. So that was just sort of my first, and is that there's a role that Planning Commission plays. We're giving we're like major stakeholders. We have major influence, but the council did hire a framework to put it together as well. And we are trusting them, and it's their responsibility to make sure that we are in compliance with all these different regulations. I'm so thankful that it is not me. When I took this job, I didn't realize they had hired a consultant. I was so relieved because I was excited. I'm like, okay, I have comp plan background, but there's so many, and then you add King County and Pierce County, there's so many different layers. So, they are responsible to make sure that we meet all of those, and we've granted that to them. Obviously, my role is coordinating, providing them information, providing you information, occasionally having opinions, but trying not to have too many. And then again, so what we have been meeting, and I realize that sometimes we forget because we did do some study sessions where they did go over housing numbers and employee numbers and different things that we're required to do. But then that was last summer, and we kind of move on from that. So we will. So again, the Planning Commission's role will not be as in-depth as you are in most of the time. You're not building it quite like you do when we do the code changes right now. But you do have that role. And then again, obviously, it'll get moved on to City Council. So that was just sort of clarifying for myself. I talked to the mayor, and again, looking at the fact that the council is the one that has hired them to do this, where we're at there. I do have the schedule. I did try to put a schedule. Again, I sort of ran out of time with the various things. It's a rough schedule that I have here. I'm happy to hand out what I have so far. I will continue to fine tune that. But just trying to help explain the second half is talking about sort of what I talk about phase 1 and phase 2. The intent is to have phase 1 and phase 2. And again, phase 2 being what are these new zoning subcategories for these new future land use designations. They are to be in compliance by the end of the year. So as soon as we sort of, like I said, if we can by May, June, have that public hearing, make that recommendation that yes, we are comfortable with the vision, the land use, big picture designation, it gets moved on. At the same time, Framework is working on the development code draft that will then make us mesh. Because that was one of the things that, unfortunately, the last time they did a comp plan update, not all of the code got changed to mesh. And so there were things in the vision that didn't trickle through. One of the things, people feel like that the large church did not mesh with that because nothing trickled through. I will also point out that we have this sort of like uptown district vision, and yet there's the use table wasn't ever kind of updated to match it. So even though it says these are what the vision of it is, and there's certain guidelines on how it looks, you can still put things in an uptown district that don't mesh with the vision of it being pedestrian friendly. So there's a lot of things that didn't carry through all of it, and that is very important. And so like I said, our hope, the schedule is to have phase one, which is the comp plan, the big picture stuff. I'm expecting draft elements, I believe by the end of the month, most of them, if not 1st of March. I know they're close. So that will get through Planning Commission kind of mid-year. And then it goes on to City Council to start kind of doing some of their review. Now, again, I also want, if we are, as soon as we feel really comfortable, not that it couldn't change, but if we're feeling like, yeah, we're pretty sure this is what we want for future land use map, I want to start sending out, like I said, those letters to those pockets that are changing so that everyone has a chance to have comment. So then we would start, by that point, Framework's going to come in with phase two mid-year with, here is the draft zoning districts, which will be the standards, guidelines, and requirements. We need to get at least the bulk of that done by the end of the year so that they're in compliance. That doesn't mean to say that we couldn't even break that down. Like, hey, this is the general stuff, but we know we're going to want design guidelines. We don't have to have that by the end of the year, but we're going to make the goal. We want that by the middle of the year. You know, there's things that we need the bulk of it so that our zoning matches what our vision is. But by doing that, we can also say, okay, these are things that are subcategories we want. I know that eventually we need to go, the use table. Whether we do that as part of this, I hope so. If not, we will follow that up because it definitely needs to mesh. Parking needs to be, all those subcategories are on. I know that we all want to, as we get the big picture, we get the zoning kind of figured out, then those things all need to follow. And how much we can do all together. So there's that. So like I said, this is really rough, but it at least gets us kind of thinking about what is there, 1, 2, 3. And I will come up with more fine tuning before the next meeting, or if I get it done before that, I'll just send it out. Let's see.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I do want to emphasize, I think if we think of that phase one as, when I look at the city, does that make sense that we're putting commercial here, we're keeping industrial here, we're keeping our more single, double duplexes here? Kind of, if that works, then that's, and our, this is what our important are, then that's what that is for. It's that second phase where we do get into how do we make sure that looks, how do we make sure that vision is carried out. And that will be more detail oriented, and that will be more specific of, it may be that, okay, like I said, in the uptown, we have some guidelines. Maybe we want to make more guidelines, or maybe we want to take those guidelines and do something very similar in another area. Maybe we want design guidelines for all multifamily because we want to make sure that they're hitting certain things. So that will be that. And again, the bulk of, we have to have it matched by the end of the year. So the zoning, will all be updated. But again, we probably won't get to all the subcategories, but we can do that continue to work on those. Any questions on that before I go into the specific thing that sort of got us all wound up last meeting?
So we'll start it with Commissioner Sweat. Any questions?
I pass.
Commissioner Whalen?
I don't have questions, but in the round robin, I'll emphasize the point that you brought out.
Oh, this is the round robin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The issue is, to me, extremely important, and I'm ready to jump in and run the race, is to have our zoning code fully capable of defending and our vision and enacting it. We've been in a situation where there wasn't, and I do go off on history to try to help people understand background, but we've been in a situation where we had a vision, nothing to support it or defend it, and then things went in place to the surprise of so many because it seemed contrary to the plan. So So that's one piece that I'm glad to hear now, that that's the goal. The other piece is how it can be a little challenging to say, yeah, let's make such and such change and not have somewhat of a good sense of what the concepts will be. So a simple example of changing a residential area to a business area, to make it simple. Well, are we, maybe, what does that mean? So that's where I get the hesitancy, and that's where I know from your work with staff and consultants, you've got the whole picture in your head, and it's obviously you care that you want to make the vision happen. It's just a bit of a challenge when it's like I'm buying the packaging, I'm wondering what's really inside. So that's where some of my trepidation is, and I'm glad you're addressing it. And I hope that we really can get it all together in effect at the same time, so we don't set ourselves up for challenges and loopholes and weaknesses in defending our vision. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Boyle?
Thank you. So let me get this straight. Our deadline for adoption by the Planning Commission for a recommendation to council first, and then it goes to Commerce or whatever?
So,
I'm looking at our deadline.
yeah, so our deadline to make, so our goal is to make a recommendation to council and hold that public hearing in the May, June area. And then right as we are, it doesn't actually, Commerce actually doesn't review it, I don't believe, but Puget Sound Regional Council does. So Framework right now is, as soon as they get the draft packet, which again, it's any day now, they're going to send that, because what Puget Sound Regional Council is looking at is they're looking, again, does it look like you've addressed traffic issues related to your housing numbers and stuff? So they're looking at, have you met and they have a checklist and they have things that they're looking at from a big picture. If they see any concerns, that way they can tell us early on. Doesn't mean we can't adapt things as we go along, but as long as there's nothing majorly changed, they'll sign, it kind of gets them signed off early on that. So they're taking care of that. We are talking, so SEPA we will be doing soon. But we aren't, we really aren't drastically changing it from what we currently have. We are tweaking it. We are allowing, we're meeting our housing goals, but we're not, there are cities that may be like, hey, we are going to, allow, Tacoma, and Tacoma's a different beast because they're a metropolitan area, but they are drastically changing theirs to kind of allow multifamily in a lot of areas. Well, that's going to majorly change their traffic needs, their utility needs. So they're probably having to do a full EIS, environmental, they're having to do all this stuff. Ours really, if you look at our numbers, our housing numbers, our stuff, it's really not a drastic change. So we're okay doing just the minor thing that says, kind of like we do everything else. Yes, we're adapting it, but, and these are the things, but it's nothing huge. So that will happen over the next couple months. That does let Commerce comment on it. All of those agencies, they get 60 days to see if they have any comments when they look at it. But there's not an approval at Commerce. Pierce County, I assume will probably look at numbers. I know King County they are having, and again, we're only a small little part of us, so that somehow they have to only just look at that part. They have a little bit of review when it comes to some of the housing stuff. So, but for the most part, Framework is taking care of all that. So all that to say is our deadline, our goal is, and part of that's because of the grant money, which Commerce we can play with. But as long as we have our draft and we can hold our public hearing by, like I said, end of May, 1st of June, that's the goal. Part of that, so then we can turn our attention to the code portion, which is that second phase that is very important. And there is grant fund, so Framework has money, it's in their budget to help us with that. And I know that they're working on sort of identifying, I know they've started already identifying where in our code things that are need to change to make sure it matches kind of stuff. So does that
Yeah, so you clarified that we need to get this thing drafted and out by June, okay?
Yeah, and so they should, like I said, they're, almost all the elements, I think they're just, like, I know the pros plan, they've been working with the Parks Department, I know there's a few utility things they need, but I believe that the elements, the draft elements, looking like they're supposed to look, are supposed to probably come to us in March for people to start taking a look at.
Okay, and then we do, and then so we submit that. Pierce County Regional Council reviews it, kicks it back to us again with any corrections or anything.
If they have any concerns, so basically they have to, I believe, certify it from
Yes.
a
Yes.
transportation, like we have to show, which, again, I don't think it's that, I mean, we don't even control most of our major highways, they're all state-owned, but, yeah, so they have to say, yes, we will certify this, it looks like you've met your, traffic and stuff.
And
But
then-
that'll all happen at the same time that we're doing our stuff.
Okay, and then they send it back to Framework,
Mm-hmm.
and then Framework tweaks it, whatever they have to do,
Mm-hmm.
and then we look at it one more time, and then it's adopted by the end of the year. That's kind of the,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Just wanted the process. That was
Mhm.
it.
And I will say, we are ahead of most other cities, so even though you probably feel a little stressed, we are ahead of the game.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I-
Commissioner Elmstead? Any questions, or would you like to pass? Commissioner Johnson?
I remember on the previous plan, it went to Puget Sound and they changed the housing. There was a difference in certain sections. I don't know if Commissioner Whalen remembers that. On the housing, the numbers were wrong and we didn't get the full certification. We corrected it and it went back to Puget Sound. And then, Puget Sound, Puget Regional Council, because the housing number was different and not accurate. So that happened at the first time. So that's a minor thing. We weren't the only city when that happened. Several cities were hit with it at the same time. But I'm glad we don't have to be in this position that other cities have been in, so.
Yeah, and I will say that's part of why Framework, because we are kind of ahead of the game, there's going to be a lot of cities turning it in towards the end of the year. And by them being able to turn it in so early, we'll know real early if there's anything that there's concerns over. I believe they have already been in discussions with them on setting up that time when they will. So that way we'll know if there's any issues really early on.
Okay, so that's first round of questions. As far as for myself, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the timeline as far as phase one comp plan is big picture, is really just looking at the zoning map, but we do have some retitling of that. So is that like that map doesn't come into play until we've done
And
the
this is the
zoning
challenge.
part
You have
of
to-
it?
There's two maps
Okay,
and there's two things. So,
okay,
and in Milton, those maps have historically almost been exact. So you sort of could say one or the other and it didn't matter. There was a few minor differences. But again, the future land use map, the FLUME, is what we're working on now. There may be, within those general categories, you can have multiple zones underneath that.
okay.
So like I said, right now, so what we're coming up with is neighborhood residential is the new one that'll kind of replace RS. You could have multiple zones underneath that as long as they, in essence, do the general. So you could have, so let's say neighborhood says you can have anywhere from 1 to 8 units per, it's a maximum 8 units per acre. Well, you might have a zone that only does the 5 per acre, and then another one might have the 8. And again, I'm just pulling numbers, but you can, this is like the big goal. Well, you can have so within that, you can have some that have a little less density, some that have a little more.
Okay,
You can, like you said, it's kind of like instead of, so if you combine, like right now we have RS, and we have RMD, the medium density.
Moderate, yeah.
We could technically have probably just put that under a residential future land use because they're both residential and they're not that different, with the idea that each zone has some specifications. They have different setbacks, they have different. So again, we've got this here that's setting like the general, and there's more. So we're kind of, but then when we get there, and again, we'll see what framework comes in, but you guys do have, this will be even more so your input of, are we comfortable with what they're identifying? Now, they're using their feedback from us, their discussions from us, to come up with what makes sense for that. You know, and I'm guessing, you know, especially when we get to like, you know, the night, you know, we've got business now, 99, we're looking to make a sub, we want to, what's that vision for that? And so we're going to have this, and this, again, this is the general. Now, you will, in the second half of the year, there will be breakdowns of those, which will be the zoning map. And then each zoning will have its standards. So, you know, are we still comfortable with those setbacks? Are we still comfortable with the heights? Are we, you know, there's some changes we'll have to do because of the state to allow some duplexes. But again, we already do. So it's not, we're not having to do as much as some other cities are. So I hope that.
Yeah, no, it
I
just
feel
helps
like
me
I got
more. So
off
it's like
track and
phase
I'm not
one
sure.
is just, you know,
Yeah.
figuring out kind of the map in general.
Yeah. And
But nothing really gets like, we're not going to be putting the cart before the horse is more what I was making sure of, is that we weren't going to be changing this map. And then we were going to have this period of gray zone where it's like, well, what's urban residential? Because that's not on.
And like I said,
anything
for
in
the
our
most
code.
part, most of them are still similar to what they are now. But yeah, and it may be like right now I kind of have the comp plan being approved prior to the zone code. It may not be. It may be that we hold it until they're both ready and we go together to council.
Okay.
But we might as well get council as close as they can get and then see where we're at.
Okay, great. So yeah, I know you've got one other item, so we'll get into that and then do one last round of discussion. We got
Sure.
7 minutes.
So what I tried to, and I apologize, I should have done it differently. I wasn't exactly sure how to set it up. We should have probably waited. But in your packet, so when we presented as we've had discussions last year, there were areas that I had already talked to Framework about, that either I had talked to the property owner or staff recommended changing those designations. We have like, there's the, next to the substation, there's that property that was zoned residential, but it's historically been some sort of industrial. And so that, I think some of you got, you know, I think he was emailing kind of requesting that we find some compromise. So there's been properties along the way in the process that, because this is our opportunity to look at the whole map, that we have, based on conversations, have put it in here to change if everybody's comfortable with that, if the majority of the plan commission are comfortable with that. So this one just is coming late in the game, so it feels probably a little different, but we have done this through all of them. If it was not an update year and just this property came, there is a process that we would have gone through just identifying this property. So when they came and they were talking, I did talk to the attorneys and talked to Framework, and because we're doing it across the city and there's different parcels that we're sort of looking at the whole, they're comfortable with us rolling them into this process. And so other than, I definitely want to do notices to everyone in that area if we decide to move forward with this and make sure everyone's aware of it. We don't have to do anything different otherwise, just making sure everybody's aware, which we're going to do for all of those in those areas, that this is their opportunity for this is when the public hearing is going to be. They're welcome to talk to us ahead of time. Do they have any concerns or questions? And so there's that on the kind of the big picture. I was asked, so this is on the last page, I think, of your packet. We've got 2 pictures here. So the top one shows when we talked about, there's the two things. So our future land use map does have the parcel to the west designated for community services, so that's why it's sort of striped with the purple. But for whatever reason, the zoning didn't agree. And in this case, that's a conflict that probably shouldn't have been, had it zoned the RS. So you sort of have that one is sort of overlaid. We want to fix that. So they came to us looking at just, what are their options, houses, they'd like to put in maybe some townhouses. So when I looked, again, when I looked at it, because there is sort of that higher density to the east, it sort of made sense, or at least it seemed like it might be a good option to make all of that, include that. It would just extend it. And then if you look at the bottom one, it's that aerial photo, so you can kind of see what's underneath it, roughly where the wetlands are. So there's the skate park, and then a lot of wetlands, and then the property that they're kind of looking at with up above. So a couple of things to address. I think the questions I heard, again, yeah, so there's a couple houses that are along Milton Way. They would be notified if we decide to move forward with that. They would be notified, and if they decided, oh my gosh, we want that too, they could come talk to us, or they could in the future come and say, hey, we're surrounded by this, we want to sell, we think this might be a good thing, and they could run it through the Planning Commission and Council like anybody else does. While I know that they're specifically sort of looking at townhouses, when we change the comp plan, and again, we will come back through with what is that zoning, and it would fall under something within our whatever makes sense on that sort of multifamily level. They technically, let's say their deal fell through, once we change it, it would be eligible for anything within that zone in the future. So if it's, again, whatever that zoning ends up being, if it's, up to 20 units, 18 units, whatever it is, that would be that in the future. So there's that to think about too. I know brought up about the school. I did not reach out to the school, but part of my feeling was if it's been for sale and the school hasn't really taken an interest, and I struggle with, if we say it's only for school, but it's been zoned something else, are we getting ourselves, I'd have to look at, are we legally, then that's almost like restricting what they can do to only letting the school buy it. That makes me a little nervous from a legal standpoint, but if that was the push of the consensus of the Planning Commission, then I would do some more talking with attorneys.
So to clarify, today's discussion is just checking for a consensus as to.
Are you comfortable?
Are we comfortable with you proceeding with investigating this more?
So what I'd love to have
Yeah.
is consensus of, we don't want to change it, leave it as it is, which I guess would be residential and school, or we are comfortable moving forward with it being under the multifamily category. And then at that point, I would start with sending out letters to all the neighbors and letting them know, and we would move forward with that being another change on the map. So I would, if we're comfortable, I would love to have that consensus. If, like I said, if.
All right, so we'll go ahead and just do a quick round of robin. We'll go ahead and start it on this side. We'll start with Commissioner Johnson, and we'll work this way to
Thank
switch
you.
it up.
Thank you. Quickly, so changing it, I'm really not for it. I was, but when I keep looking at it, I say we're short on parks per population. And boy, I wish the city could get grants from the Forest Department that are giving grants and buy it as a public place. And the other concern I have for a park, the old growth trees, the wetlands. The other part that bothers me is the road coming in off of Milton Way through there where buses come. I'm trying to look at the egress and ingress to the property. It bothers me. And quickly, what is, if we redefine this area and some of the others into new zoning, we have rules about hotels and motels in residential areas, like the RMD, right? I forgot which one, like the one across from Dave's, you know, we had to change that. That will impact whatever we're doing. The size of the lot, but I am concerned if they are townhouses or the multi-houses like behind the post office, the egress and ingress from Milton Way. So I'd prefer to expand our park ratio portion of the comp plan than have a housing here. But that's mine.
Commissioner Olmsted, do you have any questions or comments or?
I do not.
All right, Commissioner Boyle.
Of course I do. I will be quick and concise, I hope, if I can find my notes. So my concerns were with the urban zoning, which is, this is included in the potential for urban zoning, that the majority of our urban zoning is surrounded or adjacent to wetlands or areas that we're increasing the density, yet we're as close as possible as we can get to the most vulnerable of our environment. And so if you look at the urban zoning around Surprise Lake, it's 3/4 of the lake is surrounded by it. This potential property is also probably 1/3 of it is wetlands. The area down on Fife Way, which is industrial, is also wetlands. There's another area that's up by High Labos that's attached to it, just north of it, that I believe is the Copper Creek. From the looks of it, is the Copper Creek, if I'm right? That orange there, right below the Lloyd's development, the bridge.
Yeah.
And so it seems that we're increasing the density at the most vulnerable of our wetlands. And then as far as what was mentioned earlier about egress, it looks like there would have to be either some significant dirt moves off of Milton Way, which is always possible, and or they share the roadway with the school district, which I think would kind of be a conflict, so with the buses and things. But that's all the comments I have on that. And I also just wanted to defend my reaction at last meeting about this topic, because it was thrown at us and I reacted, and that's why I was overly concerned about this. But it's, you know, like you said, you see the same zoning map for 20 years, and then all of a sudden some consultant throws this at you, there was a reaction. And so I hope everyone understood that. And sometimes I don't react very somberly, so thank you.
Commissioner Whalen.
Thank you, Chair. I don't support making the changes. I looked at our packet from last month and note that, if I understood correctly, urban residential, as it's currently proposed, is 18 to 30 dwelling units per acre. And I learned at the presentation that that's a range for maximums. That's not, you can't go any lower than 18. So that was a big surprise and a clarity that I wanted to confirm. But I also, in looking at the pattern of development, I would rather see that stay as a future land use map designation for neighborhood residential. And it could be something that is to the higher end of the overall spectrum within neighborhood residential. I just get concerned about the shift westward in such just a little strip of land. into another part of the zone. So I appreciate having the question brought forward to the commission, and I appreciate staff hearing our questions in order to give staff a solid answer. Relative to the question, and then I have another question about what's to happen with that property that's got yellow in the background in the figure and got the stripes through it. Maybe we have that for a different discussion, but it was just, the future land use map always says that property is being reserved for the school, but for community facilities. We don't designate within community facilities whether it's educational or city. So I'm really excited about the changes and clarity to come. But I just don't think it's, I think we have to resolve that issue, leaving it as something reserved for community facilities. The other question that is not responsive to staff is there was a sentence on page 58 of 60, the second paragraph, under the heading change to FLUM, and the sentence was, second half of it is, and it is more likely to be developed with a higher density since a large part of the second parcel is restricted by wetlands. And perhaps at a later discussion, but I'm not aware in our code that could happen. That we have a net density calculation, starts with the big parcel of land. There's, by definition, critical areas are subtracted from that gross area, and then you apply your math, so to speak, to figure out how many dwelling units per acre you could get. So maybe not tonight, but I'd sure like to understand that
Chair,
portion
can I
of
just
our code.
clarify that one statement before everything else I'll take notes on and when we're done. All I was trying to say, and I will say that, again, I was zipping through this one to get my deadline. Not that we allow higher intensity, just the idea that because that parcel is probably at least 2/3 you can't develop on. If all you're allowing is a single family or a duplex on that entire parcel, it's not a great investment for someone to redo. Where if within our standards, it was a little bit higher, like, okay, you can now, where you could only put 2, now you can put 4, or now you can put 6, because we're allowing you to put a little higher in that section. It's more feasible for somebody to build newer houses on. Not that they're getting any bonuses for that other area. It just means that the wetland area is distributed across a few more parcels or a few more houses. So that was all I was trying to say by that statement, but.
May I just add a quick comment and just say, I was thinking of clustering. When I heard that sentence, I thought you were alluding to an idea of clustering, that if there was nothing there, you could get, for example, 12 dwelling units. But because of the wetland, you can cluster those 12 dwelling units on this part of the property. So that was a question there. The other thing regarding
yet.
that tract.
If we do that, I will have to bring it back as a whole topic in a
That's a
couple years.
big biggie. I'm not suggesting we do that now.
Not going there.
But the idea of that tract of land, it just put a note in for nominating it for conservation futures. The parcel to the north, and I know this because I served on the Conservation Futures Board, the city nominated the property to the west of the skate park for conservation futures. So that's another way to address some of the environmental issues. So thank you.
Commissioner Sweat.
I would say no. I wouldn't like to see a bunch of homes built in here because of the wetlands. And I think all of you guys over here, looked at that. And the first thing I saw when I opened this map was that area. And I did some work on some homes over here, and I know this is all wetlands. that would be crazy to put a bunch of homes in there. It's already crazy enough how dense it is all around it. Hopefully they are protecting it. But I would say, leave it as it is. What is it being used for right now?
It has a couple houses on it.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't change it. And so you can add more houses in that area. I think that would be bad for all of us. So I'll just leave it at that.
So I'll go ahead and with my comments is I'm actually okay with the idea of it, given what I know as far as a developer, and if they were to develop on this parcel, they would have to treat the wetlands, leave it alone. That would have to be separate. They're not going to be able to clear the wetlands to build on it. With that, though, if you were to open that up, and then I also drove down there and I looked at the parcels kind of going south of it and everything off of 23rd. And everything else off of 23rd is quarter-acre parcels. There's another 4-acre parcel that is getting subdivided and turned into, again, about quarter-acre parcels. And then it's the church. And so it almost just turns 23rd into like a sub-arterial as far as a lot of residential, moderate coming off of it. I don't like the idea of it being 18 to 30. But as we're looking at the land use map, something more in the townhome range or duplex, triplexes, I think would be acceptable. If we were to do that, I looked at the parcels just north of it and thinking of giving equity to the homeowners, I would want to make sure that if we were to change the zoning for that we would change the zoning for those parcels north of it, because those are both owned by the same people, and I would hate for them not to have the right to sell their property and loop into this. Because I also start thinking of, if I'm a homeowner that has this, what are my options for selling? Who's going to want to buy a 5-acre parcel if you can't develop on it, if you can't do anything? The other concern I have with the stuff being brought up on this is this future communities and stuff. Are these private owners and now we're telling them who they can't sell to, that they're only allowed to sell to the city and school because we've designated this as if you're legal non-conforming? And so if you want to move and the city and the school can't afford because they can't pass a bond and the city can't afford it, so now you're just stuck with this property you can't sell. So I kind of think of it as if I lived here and it was me wanting to sell it and have these options, I would it would be hard for me to understand how I have all of these little housing developments that might as well be a townhome, but I'm not allowed to sell to this developer, is my thought on it, especially when I look at the density so close to it. And then also as far as a building school standpoint, having walkable communities as far as an option for lower income kids and stuff like that to be able to walk to school from an apartment townhome situation. It would, if you're going to have some moderate density housing, having it near a school is kind of nice because it creates more of that walkable community, kids using the parks. It gives them, if you're going to have a smaller dwelling unit, they also have property so close to them to be able to use and play on that they're not going to have to go on bigger roads for that. So that's my thoughts on it, which I know may oppose others, but yeah. So you get to answer questions and address our comments, and then we'll go for another round of
So what I'm
Province.
hearing, and again, the consensus I'm hearing is there's not a lot of interest in changing it. It sounds like that's a no to changing it to multifamily. That was, it kind of took tallies. So if that's okay, if that's the consensus, then I will let the people know that we've talked to, and I will let Framework know that that's a no-go and we will move forward. We will, right now, the draft has it being neighborhood residential and not community facilities. So that might be something people can, there's no, again, we can still change it. So that might be something we want to sit on. And if there, unless again, there's a consensus to leave it as the proposed residential. If there's uncertainty, I will do some more digging with the attorney to see what the consequences are as if we changed it to something else. And then just a couple of quick responses to some of the statements that were made. Some of the wetlands have requirements in our code and by the state, and there's buffers. So whatever project, when a project does, just in general, when a project comes in, they have to hire experts, they have to have buffers, they have to protect. We have experts that look at that. I don't rely on myself. So those are protected. Yes, they would have to, the ingress, egress, for, again, any project, they have to show us what they are planning. They have to tell us traffic issues. We, again, have our experts look at that. So those are things that we do look at no matter what the project. Dealing with the density. So again, urban residential currently has, like I said, max of 18 to 30. That's where that secondary, the zoning can come in, and you could have, you could have two zones where one is the max is 18 and another, the max is 24. And we actually don't have anything that's 30 right now. I think we could get away with that. And it doesn't mean that someone has to build 18. It just means that's the max. They could come in and go, you know what? We only want to build 12. Or they come in and by the time they do the calculation of, well, we have to put in streets and we have to do this or that, most of the time they're lower anyway. So again, that's where it's sort of like, that's why there's sort of this range, and then you can have subzones underneath it.
That'd be like a mega church type of situation.
Well, so this would be for those areas that we have designated 18 to 30 units per acre. That, that it is like the townhouses behind or Copper Creek. Those were areas that they were allowed to have that higher density. A lot of our places are already built up. On a side note, we can talk conservation futures later because I get stuff from them all the time. So yeah, so the only thing left then, it seems pretty clear that the consensus is no to going to multifamily. Is there consensus to keep it as the draft has it as neighborhood residential, or is there kind of consensus direction to sit on that to the next meeting, and I will do a little digging of if it's even okay to keep it as community facilities, or what are the ramifications? So you want to do a round?
Oh, yeah.
Instead of
let's do a round
clarifying.
robin. Yes.
You're referring to the,
Yes.
just the
Right.
parcel that has the
Yes,
lines
the
through it.
parcel that is currently in today's
Future.
stuff not agreeing.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and start with Alan as far as, so we're asking just about the yellow, purple stripes.
So the
that-
yellow purple striped area, our current zoning has it as residential. Our current long-range plan had it community facilities.
And to
So so Frameworks draft has it as residential.
And to confirm, it is currently owned by private
By private
residents,
residents.
not by the school or the
Correct.
city. Okay.
How can we change it then to, for the school, if it's owned by somebody else? We don't own it.
And that's the challenge, I guess, is the long-term plan sort of had this assumption that maybe the school would want to buy it. I do think there is a challenge to changing the zoning on that, because that would be considered a more restrictive zone. And yes,
I would say keep it the way it is.
Yeah, Commissioner Whalen?
So I can appreciate the challenges. I'd love to learn something more from a legal perspective, because the school is only going to increase in intensity of use. But again, that points to the whole thing of how critical it is to have your future land use map supported by your code, which didn't really happen here. So I'd love to get more information on that one and can see the merits either way of whether or not to change it. So.
Commissioner Boyle?
If it's residential now, I have no problem keeping it residential.
Commissioner Olmstead?
I would like to sit on it and get more information.
And Commissioner Johnson?
I want it to become a park.
You want it to be a park, so community facilities?
I see it residential, and I want to find a grant from the Forest Department and buy all of it, and we've not reached our park capacity per population.
Well, let's get to that.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say my vote, or I would lean towards keeping it residential because it does not block the school from being able to purchase it or the city or anything else. And then at that point, if there was a purchase, we would turn that into community facilities. But in order to not restrict the homeowner or put us in some weird judicial issue, I'd prefer to keep it residential.
So I think it sounds like the consensus is mostly leaning that way. We will leave it like that way for now. It doesn't hurt for me to just bring back some legal information because legal information for future properties might be very useful. That is a good point that I hadn't thought of, is nothing stops the school from in the future saying they want to purchase this, and then we go through the process and we change it for them. If they had bought in something else, that would be as well, so.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have at this point. I will come back, like I said, I will continue to fine tune the schedule and get one that's a little more in-depth. It's not quite where I would have loved it, and the design's very rough too. But
Okay.
thank you for all of your great input tonight.
Yeah. So I apologize that we have ran over. We're going to tie up that agenda item, staff reports. We can keep them quick, everybody.
I just want to know if you're taking us to Red Robin.
I am available after this for.
I think the only thing, I thought there was something else, but it's not in my notes. The only, I just was going to mention that Shape's website, they have what they call developer portals, basically because we're part of Shape. If somebody, there is a Milton page on the Shape website that just gives some information and background and different stuff about us. So if you happen to know somebody who, like I said, they're designing it from a developer housing standpoint, but anyway, they asked us to spread that around, so I'm spreading that around.
Great. Commissioner reports. We'll start with Commissioner Sweat.
All I have is apologize for not making it to the meetings the last couple months. But I had some health issues, and hopefully I'm on the mend.
It's good to hear. It's good to see you.
I'll try to do a little better for you.
Commissioner Whalen.
A great meeting. I would ask that relative to the planning, the schedule for our year, if thought could be put from staff's perspective for potential additional meetings, because words matter so much. And I think if we sort of had a consensus about, gee, if we needed it, we've got that reserved in our calendar because people are planning ahead. So thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Good meeting. We went long when we're supposed to be trying to cut things short
Nope,
now.
time's
We
up.
talked
No.
about that for an hour and a half, but all good. I will mention that I was, obviously, people at home can tell I was moved from my seat over there for a very long time over to here. I was not asked if I wanted to be moved, but I can see the door, and that's kind of a big thing for me. So I'm happy here, and thank you, and that's all I have.
It's temporary. Sorry.
Andy, I gave you a rock.
And I had a rock.
I asked like 2 years ago if we could arrange seats and we said yes.
I did it like once or twice. But it was too much pressure. I partially did it
So you all
because
signed off,
I knew we
whether
were going to
you
do the
remember
board
it
and I
or
just
not.
shifted everybody. But
I'm
Tom
cool.
wants to sit next
Yeah.
to me. It'll be fine.
I'm cool.
Commissioner Olmstead.
It was a great meeting, lots of information, more for me to go over in our time until next meeting.
Great. And Commissioner Johnson?
Ditto,
Perfect.
actually on his.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys again for your patience and allowing us to go over. I think this was a good meeting. I also did the bridge tour, got a lot out of that. So yeah. Next meeting is March 13th